First, let's talk about ingredients. Most pasta doughs are usually made up from some sort of combo of pasta flour, finely ground semolina, fresh eggs, water and olive oil. The combination and the quantities will of course differ from recipe to recipe, but you are likely to come across some, if not all, these ingredients while making different pasta doughs. The first dough we're going to tackle is probably the easiest and the most underrated of all the doughs, the semolina pasta dough. The recipe for this dough is pretty straightforward. I always make it so it's at 45% hydration. I find this produces the best results all around for me. So I'm going to take 250 grams of finely ground semolina and turn it out onto a board, make a little well in the center. Then to that well, I'm going to add 112 grams of warm water. Then I'm going to arm myself with a fork and a dough scraper, which are basically the only tools you need for making pasta dough. Using the fork, I'm going to stir the water in the well, gradually drawing in the semolina from around the outside edge until the liquid starts to thicken up. Once the center of the well is so thick that the fork is pretty much useless, I get it out of the way and get the dough scraper involved. Using the dough scraper, I chop through it again and again, exposing the wet dough to the dry semolina until I have this sort of shaggy mess of stuff here. Then I get my hands in there to bring the dough together and knead it really well for about 10 minutes until springy. After a while, it's going to start feeling too tough to knead and like it's never really going to smooth out, and that is fine. Once it's had its 10 minutes, wrap it tightly in cling film or pop it into an airtight container and leave it to relax and hydrate for at least 15 minutes at room temperature. Or if you don't need it straight away, you can stick it into the fridge for several hours or even overnight. The resting here is the magical secret to a super smooth, soft pasta dough, so skip it at your peril. We'll come back to this little dude for shaping in a bit, but first let's make the other doughs. The next dough we're going to tackle is a super simple pasta dough recipe, which you probably already know, and it's a good one because it's pretty easy to scale. The dough is basically just a formula where for every 100 grams of pasta flour, you use 1 medium egg and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. The method for making the dough is pretty much identical to the semolina one from earlier. You tip the flour onto the board, make a well in the center, add the egg and the oil to the well. Use a fork to beat the egg and the oil together and gradually draw in the flour from the well. Once it's too thick for the fork to carry on mixing, get your trusty dough scraper involved, cutting through the egg and the flour until the dough comes together into a rough, shaggy pile. Finally, hands in to finish bringing the dough together and knead until springy, which should take about 10 minutes. Once you finish kneading, wrap it up tightly in cling film or into an airtight container and leave it for its magic 15 at room temperature, or stick it in the fridge if you don't need it straight away. This simple pasta dough is absolutely fine. You'll have some pretty decent pasta for very little work. My only issue with it is the end result is not always consistent, and this is basically because of the eggs. Eggs are not all created equal, so if your egg is slightly bigger, your dough ends up softer, and vice versa if you have a smaller egg. And this is probably fine for 99% of the people, but I just can't live my life this way. I need to know that my pasta is going to be the same way every time I make it. So over the years, I have experimented, played around with and tweaked this final recipe to create my perfect pasta dough. And it begins with the eggs. Here I'm cracking 5 whole eggs into a container and blitzing everything up together until smooth. Then I'm going to measure out 190 grams of this egg mixture. Any egg mix left over can be used for other recipes, glazes, or in my case, breakfast the next day. To the measured egg mix, I'm going to add 20 grams of olive oil and then put the whole thing to one side while I get my other ingredients sorted. For this pasta dough, I'm going to use a mixture of 180 grams of pasta flour and 175 grams of semolina for that perfect balance of silkiness and texture. Mix these both together in a bowl and follow the same process as we've done for the previous 2 doughs. Tip the flour onto the board, make a well in the center, add the egg and oil mixture and use a fork to start mixing everything together. Once it's too thick to mix, get the scraper in there, cutting everything up and scraping it back together until you have this soft, crumbly mess. Then hands in, bring the whole lot together, kneading the dough for 10 minutes until reasonably smooth and springy. Then, just like the other doughs, wrap it up or cover it and give it its magic rest to relax and hydrate for at least 15 minutes. And I promise, after that rest, you are going to see a dramatic change in that dough. It'll be smoother, softer, and more importantly, more photogenic. Now the doughs have rested, it's time to divide them up into pieces. 4 should do, and shape them as you like. For the semolina dough, I'm going to show you 3 easy shapes that you can make by hand, and the first one up is orecchietti. Roll the dough into a 1 centimeter thick sausage and then cut that sausage into 1 centimeter pieces. Then, using a serrated edge of a butter knife, starting at one end of the dough, press down and pull the knife carefully towards you, dragging the dough underneath and tearing up that surface. Then pick each piece up and gently press your thumb into the smooth side to create this sort of indent in the center with the tears on the outside. It looks pretty simple, but it does take a little bit of practice to get the pressure right, but it's well worth it. Next, cavatelli. Once again, roll the dough to a 1 centimeter thick sausage and cut into 1 centimeter pieces. Then take your thumb and push down and forward on the pieces of dough to flatten them out and create this nice little groove in each piece of pasta. This groove is perfect for holding sauce once it's cooked, and if you're feeling pretty full of yourself, you can even do 2 at a time. What a legend. The final semolina shape is a bit of a cop-out as it's pretty much just like the cavatelli, but out of all three, it's definitely my favourite, the malaredas. Exactly the same technique as the cavatelli, but with the addition of a ridge gnocchi board to roll them on, creating this gorgeous little grooved nugget. To be honest, it's not just my favourite of these three, I think it's my favourite pasta shape full stop. You can cook all of these immediately, or you can leave them to dry out fully and store them in an airtight container, whatever you want. Now, when it comes to shaping fresh egg pasta, we're going to get technology involved. Divide the dough into 4, take one, lightly dust it with semolina and roll it out so it's just thin enough to be put through the pasta roller. Carefully feed the pasta through the rollers using your hand to support the dough as it comes out. Once the pasta passes through the pasta... oh my god. That was like a fucking tongue twister. Once the pasta passes through the rollers, adjust the thickness with this little knob on the side, bringing the rollers gradually together, making your pasta thinner and thinner every time you pass it through. If at any point the pasta starts to feel sticky or tacky, dust both sides lightly with semolina and continue as normal. Don't try and pass this through on the thinnest setting straight away, or you're going to end up with pasta that has basically been extruded and it's more likely to tear and just be generally crap. Be patient, pass it through the rollers gradually, and you will have some amazing silky smooth pasta sheets. I usually get it down to the 5th or 6th setting depending on what I'm doing. Once the pasta's done, lightly dust it with semolina and leave it to dry for a few minutes if you're going to be cutting it into ribbons. This drying is going to allow you to make cleaner cuts, whether you're doing it by hand or by machine. If you're making raviolis, you can just use it straight away. This pasta dough recipe is my favourite because it is a fantastic all-rounder. Great for drying, cooking fresh, cutting or filling. It does everything beautifully, and the taste and texture is just incredible. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain to have to measure eggs to the gram, but I think the end result is well worth the work. I'm going to show you quickly how to cut pasta by hand because I am too cheap to buy the additional pasta cutters along with my rollers. But apart from being cheap, if I do make ribbon pasta, I usually only make pappardelle because I love it and you only need a knife to do it. Once the pasta sheets have dried out for a bit, cut them down to size. You can make them as long as you like, but I like to keep them around 30 to 40 centimeters. Dust each sheet generously with fine semolina and fold them into 3. Then using a sharp knife, cut each sheet into 1-inch thick strips and repeat with the remaining sheets. Then if you want to, you can stack and roll them up into little portions like this and keep them to one side until you're ready to use them. Of course, if you don't want pappardelle for some reason, then you could always use the same technique to create tagliatelle just by cutting the sheet into finer strips, or go even further and make fettuccine. But really, what a faff. Even watching this edited down into 5 seconds is painful. Imagine doing this for a meal for 4. No thanks. Of course, you can shape these up into little nest portions to be put to one side and used later on as well. Oh, you could also do lasagna sheets as well, like this. There you go, bonus pasta shape. Cooking the pasta is pretty straightforward. Boiling water, plenty of salt, and plunge that pasta straight in there. Cooking time will depend on the pasta and the thickness, but as a guide, my little malaredas here cooked in about 2 minutes, and a pappardelle was less than a minute. Finally, I think everyone would agree that finishing the pasta in the sauce is vital for incredible pasta dishes. So take the pasta out a minute or so before it's cooked through and finish the cooking in the sauce with a little splash of pasta water, and give it a good toss around when you do and get that sauce super thick and nice and silky. But I'm not going to get into the sauces right now because I think we've covered more than enough for one day, and today it's all about the pastas. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos. YouTube reckons you're going to love this video, so why not check it out? I'll see you in the next one.